Today's episode is brought to you by Malwarebytes Premium Security. Protect your computers and devices from cyber attacks 24/7 with Malwarebytes Premium Security. And go to malwarebytes.com/lock and code for an exclusive offer. That's malwarebytes.com/lock and code.
License plate readers are 100% used to circumvent the Fourth Amendment because they don't have to see a judge. They don't have to find probable cause. According to the policies of most police departments, they don't even have to have reasonable suspicion.
This is Lock and Code, a Malwarebytes podcast. I'm your host, David Ruiz. Our main story today is about automated license plate readers, or ALPRs. ALPRs are one of the fastest growing forms of neighborhood surveillance today, and if you drive a car, there's a near guarantee you have been captured in this system. ALPRs are AI-powered cameras that scan and store an image of every single vehicle that passes in front of their view. They are installed wherever cars are and could be, mounted onto streetlights, installed under bridges, disguised in water barrels, and affixed onto telephone poles, lampposts, parking signs, and even cop cars. Once installed, these cameras capture a vehicle's license plate number, along with its make, model, and color, and any identifying features, like a bumper sticker or damage or even sport trim options. And because nearly every ALPR camera has an associated location, these devices and their amassed data can reveal where a car was headed and at what time. And by connecting data from multiple ALPRs, it's easy to determine the route that a car took on any given day. This can be deeply sensitive information, and yet the safeguards around this information are lacking. In 2024, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency discovered 7 vulnerabilities in cameras made by Motorola Solutions, and at the start of 2025, the outlet Wired reported that more than 150 ALPR cameras were leaking their live streams. But today's episode is not about patching vulnerabilities or closing data leaks, because ALPRs have a different problem, and it's about what they're used for. ALPRs are almost uniformly purchased and used by law enforcement. These devices have been used to help solve crime, but their databases can be accessed by police who do not live in your city or county or even state, and who do not need a warrant before making a search. In fact, when police access the databases managed by one major ALPR manufacturer named DeFlock, one of the few guardrails those police encounter is needing to type a single word into a basic text box. When Electronic Frontier Foundation analyzed 12 million searches made by police in Flock's systems, they learned that police sometimes filled that text box with the word protest, meaning that police were potentially investigating activity that is protected by the First Amendment. As the ACLU wrote about these devices, quote, "Automatic license plate readers have the potential to create permanent records of virtually everywhere any of us has driven, radically transforming the consequences of leaving home to pursue private life and opening up many opportunities for abuse." End quote. Today, to help us understand the boom in ALPR cameras across the nation, what abuses are possible because of their data, and how people can fight back, we're speaking with Will Freeman, founder of the ALPR-tracking project, DeFlock Me. Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
We are excited to have you here, and I wanted to start the episode by understanding the scale of the ALPR surveillance network, right? How many cities are being monitored by how many cameras, and how has that grown in the past few years, 10 years even?
Yeah, so I've been keeping an eye mostly on the company Flock. They're the biggest player in this industry. And Flock claims to be in over 5,000 communities. And from public records requests, we found they have at least 102,000 cameras across the United States. There are other manufacturers, and they have their own number of cameras. So over 5,000 communities in the US is where these things are.
How has that grown in the past few years? Do we see a steady increase, or is it like there was an exponential explosion in the past 1 or 2 or 3 years? Just help me understand what's the scale of growth here.
Yeah, it's growing really rapidly. The ALPRs aren't new. They've been around for a long time. I can't remember exactly how long, but yeah, what they used to do is just snap pictures of passing cars, decode just the license plate, see if it was a wanted car, and then report that to police. They do a lot more than that now. So Flock has led the new wave of ALPRs, and they started in 2017. They took off pretty slowly, but I'd say around 2022 to 2023, they started exploding across the US. So many cities adopted them. And as one metric, OpenStreetMap, that's what DeFlock uses as its backend. It's kind of like the Wikipedia of maps. When I started the project back in October 2024, there were less than 10,000 ALPRs mapped on OpenStreetMap. And today, I believe there are over 60,000. So it is growing a lot more quickly than it used to.
You were saying that, this explosion, it seems that like cities are just bringing them in, bringing them in. And I wanted to ask why, right? Why have ALPRs become as popular or as common as they are now?
A few reasons. One, it's super, super cheap. These things are sold as subscriptions usually. So yeah, Flock, you don't own the camera. They usually cost around 2,500 per camera per year to operate, and they're responsible for the installation, maintenance, data storage, and everything else that goes along with it. So cities basically don't have to do anything other than pay a company a relatively small amount of money, and they market them as policing as a service, basically. So a lot of cities will say they have issues with staffing their police department. And if they can spend a few $100,000 to fix that problem or what they think is fixing that problem, they're happy to jump on it.
I don't know if you have the answer to this, but I wanted to know as well, as soon as you said here, a lot of departments are short staffed. That makes perfect sense. That is a problem that's happening. And so police departments think, well, let's put that money into these cameras because they are relatively cheap. Do you know if there's any police unions or departments who are upset about that because they think actually this should go into human employment? This should like employ a human being, a person, give someone a job. Something I immediately thought of.
I don't know of any police unions that are against it. I know most police officers that I've talked to or like seen speaking at city council meetings are really for this technology. They're really excited about it. It's a tool that seems to make their job easier, and it bypasses the process of getting a search warrant, which can be annoying, I guess, but it's annoying for a reason.
We will address that, but I wanted to talk about the data that is collected and recorded by these devices because, like you said, years ago at the outset, they were just snapping photos and storing a license plate number. And it seems now it's actually video feeds, which is quantifiably far more data. And so I just wanted to understand, this sounds like a lot of data. Where is the data stored? Who owns the data and who can access it?
Yeah, so yeah, for Flock, the biggest vendor, the data is stored in their cloud storage, basically. It's a black box, so we don't really know exactly how it works unless we can somehow access their AWS infrastructure. But it seems to be all put in one place. They have access controls that aren't so clear. And despite them storing it, they say that the customer owns the data. In reality, the customer doesn't always know what access controls are configured, and they don't know about like any loopholes to access that data.
Do we know how the data is segmented, if at all, right? Because I like to assume it's not one enormous cloud database because that feels dangerous in case of like a cybersecurity breach. But the question still remains, do we know how it is segmented, if at all? Is it, by city or county? Help me understand that.
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't know if it's segmented. When Flock gives information to police departments to present to the city council about information security, they never mention anything about data segmentation. Instead, they use distractions like, oh, we use encryption, but I mean, so does everyone else. They never address that, and we don't know.
Do we also know if there are any restrictions on whether police or, let's say, other law enforcement agencies like sheriffs, do we know if there's any delineation between accounts there? So what I'm asking is, can police in Louisiana look up search records in California? And also similarly, can a sheriff's department in Ohio look up something in Pennsylvania? Are there any lines here, any restrictions?
Yes, there are some restrictions. Those restrictions are mostly configurable by the departments that are involved. So there are networks like the national network, and that's a reciprocal data sharing relationship. A law enforcement agency just has to check a box that says something like join the national network. And that allows everyone else who's opted into that national network to search their cameras. And it allows them to search the cameras of everyone else opted into the national network. And yeah, at the moment, that's about 102,000 cameras on that network. They're also one-to-one data sharing requests, and they're kind of like, I guess, like social media friend requests where you can contact an organization and ask them, hey, can I have access to your camera? And that doesn't even have to be manually approved. In a lot of cases, these agencies can check a box that says automatically approved data sharing requests for cameras. I haven't seen what that number is, but I know from Flock's training material that they heavily advertise that. So I'm assuming most people have that on. Also, from looking at transparency portals and making public records requests, the average agency probably has at least 100 agencies that they share with. So keeping the data within your community isn't very common. And I don't think I've ever seen that other than for like one day when Denver did it after people got upset. And now they reverted it back to a lot of agencies.
Tell me more about that, because that was immediately one of the questions I had about this national opt-in network. I was wondering, well, do we know of anyone who's actually said no to that? I don't know if this is the exact same thing you're talking about with Denver, but what happened there?
So a lot of agencies have opted out of the national network because of news about license plate readers, specifically news about them being used for purposes that don't align with their city or county or whatever. I'm not sure if national network is enabled by default or if you have to check that. But I know that a year or two ago, most agencies were on the national network. So Denver was being really shady. People asked them how many organizations had access to their cameras. And first they gave a really high number, but then they said, oh, wait, no, it's actually this. And then they gave a much lower number, like from thousands to hundreds.
Oh.
And then some city council members in Denver, I think it was Sarah Parody, made a request to actually see that data. And apparently, right after they asked that question, they opted out of the national network, which makes me think that they knew they were on it. They didn't want people to know about it, and then they changed it. So yeah, Denver is one of the cities that opted out of the national network. Just to the northwest in Boulder, they also opted out of the national network after I talked to the city manager and said, hey, you're on the national network. A lot of police departments don't seem to know they're on the national network. So that's what makes me think it might be enabled by default. And a lot of city staff and city council members also don't even know what a national network is.
You said that you spoke with like Boulder and that they didn't know they were on the national network. And I wanted to know, is that something you frequently do? Do you just go to city councils or to police departments and say, hey, you're on the national network. I don't know how you feel about it. What is that work? That sounds really interesting.
Yes, it's really effective. So yeah, you can make public records requests for all kinds of information. A really cool one is called a network request or a network audit. These are logs of everyone who has accessed your organization's cameras. And yeah, currently there are about 10 to 15,000 searches per day on the national network. So yeah, these keep track of all the searches that are done. So it has like the officer's abbreviated name. It has whatever reason they typed in, the license plate they're searching for, any identifying features they're searching for, when it was searched, and then any search terms that they're using for freeform, which is their natural language search. So you could say like, look for a trailer with a skid steer on it or something like that. Things that you can't normally search for with their default filters.
That sounds a lot more powerful than I assumed, honestly. I did think it was like I thought it was type in a license plate number. I didn't know you could make that kind of search for characteristics is what it sounds like.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, anything a person can see and describe, you can search for.
Do we know if there are any technical safeguards against like misusing these databases? And what I'm thinking here is things like data deletion policies, things that companies have data minimization policies. Companies say, hey, we're not going to store this beyond a certain date. And then also, in the EU, they have GDPR and says, hey, we can't use this unless there's an express purpose. I wanted to know, again, are there technical or policy safeguards against misusing this data?
Yeah, most police departments or law enforcement agencies in general have their own policy for accessing this data. And yeah, sometimes they prohibit things like immigration enforcement. They'll also prohibit things like minor crimes, like they'll only use it for major crimes. And it differs from agency to agency. So yeah, they have policies for that. There's not really a great way of enforcing them. It's kind of just a written policy, and you have to hope they follow it.
Yeah.
And for any technical safeguards, I don't think there are many technical safeguards because, yeah, like you mentioned earlier, all you have to do is type in a reason. Sometimes they can be required to type in a case number if their agency requires them to do so, but it's optional by default. And there's also no way of checking that that case number or that reason is even related to what's being searched. There really aren't great safeguards at the moment. The technology is evolving a lot more quickly than legislation is.
Can a person also request that their data gets removed from Flock's databases? I'm thinking of how, I can tell Facebook, please not just delete my account, but remove my data. I can tell a company, hey, I can ask a company, how did you get my address, right? We in California have laws that allow that. Is that allowable with Flock's databases? Can I ask Flock to get rid of my license plate when it shows up in their cameras?
No, you can't. And that's because of how they operate. They operate under the premise that if you are driving around in public, you have no expectation of privacy. And that's clearly not the case, as Carpenter versus the United States has shown. You don't have zero expectation. You have little, but the whole of your movements is protected. And they do have that message, but there's no case law yet, so they're getting away with it, and they're just trying to get away with it for as long as they can until they get shut down and then have to pivot.
What is Carpenter versus United States?
Carpenter versus the United States was a Supreme Court decision, I think in 2018, that dealt with cell site location information. So information from your cell provider that shows approximately where you are over time.
Mhm.
And it was ruled that you had to have a warrant to access that, because in the original case, they didn't have a warrant to access that. So it was unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment. And cell site location information is similar enough to license plate reader location information in a lot of ways. One, it shows license plate reader location shows your exact location at a point in time. Cell site location information shows your approximate location also at a point in time. So I would argue that with enough license plate readers, and if you look at a map, there are a lot of them, this is even more dangerous and gives more information than cell site location information. And it ought to require a warrant as well.
I remember the opinion from that case. I believe it says something like this type of information can show, again, I think the term here is a pattern of life. And that felt like such a win when that decision was made, because I was working at Electronic Frontier Foundation at the time, and it felt like, yes, we all knew that. Of course, this type of information can be an invasion of privacy if accessed without a warrant. And that was a major moment. Like that was a very large moment in affirming rights as they translate to data. And so, like you said here, I feel the same way. Location data is actually even more precise. One would argue that it is in more need of protection. I wanted to switch here and also understand, we talked a little bit about technical safeguards and non-existent technical safeguards. I wanted to know if there were non-technical safeguards, right? Like you were talking about how a police officer can enter a case number and they can enter a reason for a search, and sometimes they don't even have to correlate. And to me, that sounds like it's open for abuse. So I wanted to know, what is stopping police from misusing or abusing their searches of ALPR data?
Not just stopping them. If anything, Flock is moving in the opposite direction from ensuring transparency. One thing they did recently is that reason text field. I believe it's either now a dropdown or can optionally be a dropdown, which means instead of being honest about their answer, they have to choose from what's allowed, and they can just choose whatever they want. But I guess that is technical. So non-technical, are you referring to will a supervisor look it over or something like that?
Yeah, pretty much that. Yeah.
There are audit logs. There's an organization audit, which is what a supervisor can do for members of their own agency. and they can see what they've looked up. They can see the reasons. They can search it. They can verify it if they want. But in reality, that doesn't seem to happen. And I know from experience that hasn't happened at a few police departments that I spoke with, because when I told them that their cameras were being used for purposes they didn't agree with, they were unaware, despite thousands of records being logged in their system that it was.
That's kind of what it felt like would happen is if the safeguard here is human review, my next question was going to be like, well, has human review actually ever led to discipline that we know of?
Yeah, a few times. And yeah, there were two cases in Kansas where police officers were using the system to stalk their exes or like a wife they didn't live with or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were two separate cases where they did that. And I forgot exactly how they found out, but they did use the audit logs to find them and prosecute them. Same thing happened in Georgia a few weeks ago, where I think it was the police chief who actually used the cameras to stalk someone, and he was also caught. And I know not all of them are reported because there's a website, haveibeenflocked.com, and it compiles reports from public records of how Flock is used. And several of these stalking cases show up in one of the reports called extended surveillance. And that's where an officer is repeatedly searching the same license plate or the same vehicle over a long period of time, rather than just putting it on a hot list, which is something that would actually alert officers to go intercept that person. So it definitely is suspicious behavior.
Is that the only type of abuse that we know of, right? Is police who are making concentrated stalking efforts against exes or current spouses or people going through divorces? What other types of abuses do we know about?
Oh yeah, well, using it for unauthorized purposes. So, like you said with the protests, if someone's asserting their First Amendment right and the police don't like it, they shouldn't be investigating a person. If they try that another way, they'd need a warrant, and they probably wouldn't get a warrant unless something clearly illegal had occurred. Other things like prosecuting crimes across states, that's another one. So, like Texas, abortion is illegal there, but other states, abortion is legal there. And a Texas law enforcement agency performed a search for somebody who left Texas who had an abortion on the national network, not just within Texas. So law enforcement agencies can use this to prosecute crimes that occurred across state lines with different laws. And that's also dangerous.
You were saying also that sometimes this allows for almost like a workaround of a warrant requirement. And you said, well, warrants are annoying, but they're annoying for a reason. I just wanted to ask your thoughts on that. Why do we have a warrant? And why is it important in this type of thing? Why would we want this?
Yeah, it's super important. We have a Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. So if a cop wants to search our location or go through our computer just to see if we've done something illegal, they're not allowed to do that. And the protection's in place for a good reason, because like in the past it has been abused. It was clearly written into our constitution because it's very important to protect our right to privacy. And a warrant is supposed to ensure that it's highly likely you're a criminal, and because of that you're going to be searched. And yeah, license plate readers are 100% used to circumvent the Fourth Amendment because they don't have to see a judge. They don't have to find probable cause. According to the policies of most police departments, they don't even have to have reasonable suspicion. The only requirement is like law enforcement purpose or general electronic surveillance. So that really opens the door for them to just search something because they feel like it. And that's not how policing should be done, because the state has a lot of power. They can mess up your life. They can throw you in jail for a crime you didn't commit. If they don't like you, they can make your life miserable. And if you express opinions that are different than what's popular or different than the current administration, they can do something about that. And it's really important to make sure that they're operating within the law. So yeah, the Fourth Amendment and warrant requirements are not there to be annoying. They're there to protect us. And that's not something we can just throw out. And ALPRs, as they are right now, are an easy way around that. And cops still have plenty of tools to track your location with a warrant if they wanted to.
You've also mentioned a couple of times here that cops can input like a license plate into the database and say like, hey, this is one to watch out for. This is someone who is suspected of a crime, or even a car that has been reported stolen. And it seems like there's some determinations being made here, right? And saying that like, okay, this car is stolen. This car likely belongs to a criminal. And I wanted to know, in the same way that we know about police abuse of this data, do we also know times where ALPR devices and the data itself have made incorrect determinations?
Yes, that happens more often than you'd think. I forgot what the exact error rate for Flock was, but one of the representatives from Flock in a city council meeting in Coralville, Iowa, said that the error rate was, I think, somewhere around like 5 to 10%. I could be wrong, but that's what I remembered. I remembered it
Yeah.
was a lot higher than I expected it to be, which
Yeah.
makes sense because it's just optical character recognition. It's a computer looking at an image, trying to take a guess at what letters are on the plate. And as we probably know from driving around, if you have snow on your plate, if you have dirt stuck to it, if your plate is bent, a lot of times people can't even accurately figure out what a license plate is. So it will have to take a guess, and that guess won't always be right. So one instance pretty close to where I live right now is in Aurora, Colorado. There was a family pulled over and held on the ground, like face down with kids at gunpoint. And that was because the license plate reader claimed it was a stolen motorcycle, but it was not a stolen motorcycle. It was an SUV that they owned. And it got the license plate number wrong, but the police just trusted it too much and pulled them over and treated them like they were felons. That's not the only time. It's happened other places too. Another example in Colorado that happened a few weeks ago is a woman was accused of package theft. She was served a summons, which would likely be an arrestable offense in other jurisdictions. And yeah, the police who served it to her told her that he was 100% confident that she was the one who committed the crime. And the only thing she did was drive by a flock camera that was kind of near the house at the same time. That's all the evidence they had, and they treated that as what they claimed to be 100% proof that she committed the crime.
Does anyone get in trouble for this? By anyone, I mean police, because these feel like things that can absolutely at least ruin a person's week or month, but it can also completely change their interaction and their understanding with police. So it can ruin their relationship with trusting police. And so I just wanted to ask, do police get in trouble for these things?
Usually no, because of qualified immunity, which means if they're not doing something like terribly wrong, if they just like made a mistake or had a misunderstanding, then they can usually get away with it. And the only people who are punished are the taxpayers. So in Aurora, in that example, it was like a $1.9 million settlement coming straight from taxpayers to this family.
That's kind of high.
Yeah.
I also wanted to understand, we've been hearing these stories about these are incorrect determinations. There are abuses that are made. There are provable instances of stalking. And it's interesting that these are the stories we're talking about when I think if you asked Flock and if you asked a lot of police departments who are doing good work, they would say these are tools to help solve crimes. And so there are a lot of ways, I think, to measure whether ALPRs, again, work. And I put that in quotation marks. But again, if we're getting the claims here from the people who make the devices and the people who buy the devices or loan them, if we're getting the claims of security benefits, I think it's fair to ask, do ALPRs make a neighborhood safer?
I don't think ALPRs make your neighborhood safer. They provide evidence because they capture everyone who's driving there. So if a crime does occur and police are doing thorough work, then yes, they could use that to help figure out who actually committed the crime. It doesn't do anything to prevent the crime from occurring in the first place. You see it all the time. I mean, Flock even brags about it. Like stolen vehicles are flagged by these things and caught by them. And that wouldn't continue to happen if people were genuinely concerned about cameras. Criminals don't really care about cameras. They're going to commit the crime one way or another. So yeah, this might help prosecute someone after the fact, but it just can't actually stop crime. Flock has claimed several times that their goal is to eliminate crime, and it's not possible, and it's definitely not possible with cameras.
It just reminds me of the idea that, like, I think several years ago, Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan, they donated, I think it was $1 billion to this fund of, I think it was like eliminating viruses or curing. It was this enormous idea, right? Like this enormous idea, curing humans. And I understand it was a marketing tactic, right? You donate $1 billion to something, it's got to sound like attractive and it's going to get some media attention, and I get all of that. But also, we don't have like cures for most things. We have treatments, and we have ways to manage a lot of things, and we have ways to treat symptoms, but like actual disease, right? It's weird to say that you could like eliminate that. And it reminds me there of what you said with Flock, like they want to eliminate crime, which is not possible, right?
Yeah.
And it's not even a question of whether it's a function of cameras. It's just crime itself. And it's interesting that that's the way they build themselves. Like, well, we're a camera company and we want to eliminate crime. Those are insane goals. That's all.
Yeah.
I wanted to end here, right? We've spoken a lot about what can happen, a lot about the work that you're doing. And I think folks might be asking, okay, well, what role do I play? What role can I play? So I wanted to ask, what can people do to protect themselves from this surveillance network?
Yeah, there are a few approaches. One is you can try to avoid them. You can, obviously, the DeFlock map is not complete, it's crowdsourced. But if you find these things and add them to the map, and if all of the LPRs in a city are mapped, you can route yourself around them and find ways to get where you're going without passing one of these things. That's the easy way. Eventually, cities will probably install more and more, and that won't really be as feasible. And it's already not feasible in some cities that have a really high density of these things. So yeah, that's one way. Another way is to talk to your local city council or town council and let them know what you think about these things, because almost all the time, these license plate readers are installed without the city council knowing. They're slipped into the consent agenda and portrayed as public safety equipment or situational awareness tools, things that sound really harmless, but people are likely to vote yes on because why not? And even when they do describe them as license plate readers, city council, like that's not what they typically deal with. They don't think, oh, this is dangerous. So yeah, they're usually like very unaware. And it's our job to tell them what they actually do so they can make a better decision for us. If that's blocking a contract, waiting a bit, evaluating other options. And yeah, like LPRs might be around to stay. And if they are, I think they need to have a lot of privacy protections built in. I guess the number one being like they don't actually send anything to the government unless you're actually a criminal. That's probably the biggest one. But at the moment, that's not what they're doing. So we will need legislation or kicking these things out until we get legislation.
I actually had one more follow-up here because you were talking about, a lot of times these city councils, they don't know that this is happening. And so there's not a really malicious bent here. And I think it is important to end this episode by understanding, I think, who the bad guy is, right? Because I think some folks could listen to this and they could be like, wow, these people hate cops. And I don't want that to be the takeaway because, look, I know people, I have coworkers who I know, again, ALPRs have been used to help solve crimes in their neighborhoods. I know that that evidence was actually crucial in helping solve a crime. And I know that there are many police out there who are using this for honest work and they're not abusing the system. And so I think it's important to say, to help us understand here, who are the bad guys, if any, in this story, and what are the fixes?
The companies are the bad guys. They're the ones with a ton of money, with a lot of influence, giving police departments a playbook of how to do this. And yeah, police departments, they just want a tool. They want tools to help them do their jobs. They're not evaluating whether something is technologically safe or anything like that. That's not what they do. These companies try to expand so quickly and sneak their way into so many cities and towns and even rural areas before people can do anything about them. And they have lied many times about how their system actually works and how secure their data actually is. So yeah, the companies are the bad ones, in my opinion. License plate readers are not going to be the only surveillance technology that shows up. There's already a lot of other stuff, including microphones or things that can detect you by the Bluetooth address of your smartwatch or your cell phone or your tire pressure sensor. And yeah, they will try to market those things too. And chances are city council and police departments won't really ask too many questions because they don't know too much about them. So yeah, we need legislation to protect against this because companies are motivated by money and they will do whatever it takes to get that. They don't really have the values that we have as people.
Will, I wanted to thank you again for coming on today's show and for telling us all about this, again, surveillance network that is taking root, has already taken root in this country, and what people can do to stay safe. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David.
To our listeners, Happy New Year. We'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. Until then, stay tuned, stay safe, and remember, you can read all our cybersecurity coverage on Malwarebytes Labs at malwarebytes.com/blog. Finally, our intro music is by Kevin MacLeod from incompetech.com, and our outro music is by Woa from unminus.com. Today's show has been edited by our podcast consultant, Eric Johnson, at lightningpod.fm. Thank you, folks.